Let's talk about the United Kingdom. It's this incredible place where, 1,000 years of history is smashing right into a 21st century crisis. So what happens when a system that old faces a test this modern?
Yeah, that quote really sets the scene, doesn't it? The key word here is stagflation. And honestly, it's a nasty combination. It's when the economy just stops growing, but prices for everything you buy keep climbing. For the UK right now, this isn't just some abstract economic theory. It is a serious warning shot.
And look, this isn't just a problem for economists to debate. This is what's really hitting people at home, what's keeping them up at night. I mean, look at these numbers. A staggering 87% of people are worried about the cost of living. The NHS, the health service, and the economy are right up there too. This is way more than just a poll. It's practically a national consensus of anxiety. So that brings us to the big question, right? How on earth did one of the world's major economies find itself in this spot? Well, the answer isn't in today's news cycle. To really get it, we've got to look way, way back into the country's history.
See, to understand the UK's present, you absolutely have to look at its past. We're talking about its unique political foundations, a system that's been built up layer by layer for centuries.
Here's what makes the UK's political system so different from almost anywhere else. It doesn't have a single formal constitution. There's no one sacred document you can point to and say, that's it. Instead, its rulebook is more like a patchwork quilt of laws, traditions, and court rulings, all stitched together over a very, very long time. So, let's dive into that. Let's take a look at this unwritten rulebook. Think of it as the political operating system that's quietly running in the background, powering the entire country. Okay, so what does that actually mean, an unwritten constitution? Well, it's pretty much what it sounds like. The fundamental rules for how the country works aren't all gathered in one place. They're found in a whole bunch of different sources: laws passed by Parliament, big precedent-setting court cases, and these fascinating unwritten rules everyone just kind of agrees to follow, called conventions. And this is a really helpful way to see the difference. On one side, you've got what's called a rigid constitution, like in the US, where changing it is a massive, difficult process. But on the other side, you have the UK's system, which is flexible. What that means is that Parliament can change the rules, even fundamental ones, with just a simple majority vote. And that, right there, gives the government of the day an incredible amount of power. So, if it's not in one book, where does it all come from? Well, it boils down to these three core sources. First, you have Acts of Parliament. These are the actual written laws. Simple enough. Second, you have judicial decisions, basically important court cases that set a precedent for how things are done. And third, and this is the really fascinating part, you have conventions. These are the unwritten, unspoken rules of the game that everyone in politics just, agrees to follow. Right, so a system like this doesn't just pop into existence. It's the product of centuries of history. A history defined by slow, gradual evolution, not by some big, sudden revolution. And you can really see that long, slow process right here. We're going all the way back to the Norman Conquest in 1066. Then you get the Magna Carta in 1215, a huge deal, basically telling the king he wasn't above the law. Fast forward to 1707, you have the Acts of Union that bring England and Scotland together. And then the Industrial Revolution completely reshapes the economy. Every single one of these was a gradual shift, an evolution, not a complete break with the past. And this is the absolute key to understanding everything. Think about countries like America or France. They were born out of these huge, defining revolutions. They had a year zero moment where they could sit down and write a whole new rulebook from scratch. Britain never had that. Its system just evolved, bit by bit over a millennium. Okay, so this brings us right to the heart of the matter. We've got this ancient system, built for slow, gradual change. What happens when it gets slammed by the speed and the sheer pressure of a 21st century crisis? At the core of this whole system, you've got two things: centuries of tradition and this incredibly important principle called parliamentary supremacy. Now, what that means is that Parliament, in theory, is all-powerful. It is the ultimate source of law in the land. It can make any law, and it can unmake any law. Its power is, for all intents and purposes, absolute. And here's that modern test we've been talking about. Look at this data from 2024. GDP growth? It flatlined. Inflation? It's starting to creep back up. Unemployment? It's rising. These aren't the kind of slow, manageable changes this old system was designed to handle. These are fast, painful economic shocks. So, this is where it all comes together. The entire tension of the situation is right here in this question. Can a political system that was designed for slow, incremental change actually cope with the rapid-fire shock of a modern economic crisis? That is the question facing the UK today.
Which, of course, leads us to the future. There's a new government in charge now, and they are facing a monumental task. And they have to tackle all of it while working within the confines of this unique, historic system we've been talking about.
So, let's break down where things stand. You've got the new Labour government, which came into power in July 2024, and their #1 goal is to get the economy growing again. At the same time, the Bank of England is being really cautious about cutting interest rates because they're worried that could just fuel more inflation. And looming over all of it is that intense public pressure. Remember, 87% are worried about the cost of living, influencing every single move they make. And so we kind of end up right back where we started. For centuries, the UK's greatest strength has been its stability, its uncanny ability to bend and adapt over time. But the big question now is whether that famously flexible system is still flexible enough for the challenges of today's world. Or, just maybe, if its age is finally beginning to show.